As the wind erodes and the water corrodes, altering everything we think we know, but we don't. It's all temporary, and it used to, but now the thought doesn't scare me or keep my feet from following one after another until I slumber. Then my mind, not my feet, wander and dream of people and places I'll never see again. I've mended as much mental anguish as I can, and now I try to use this language to take these thoughts from my head to my pen. Cause though I don't speak of my dead friends or the circumstances, often the blow never softens or yields. I'm in a desolate field, lonesome stargazing, night blazing, chasing traces of remembrance and reverence of relevant friends and acquaintances, and faceless and nameless names and faces. And while my mind is racing through these photo albums and quotations, all these people and places far from me, for only land and stars I see when I'm outside of the Mile High City, which is not my city, for I was born 1,000 miles northeast of there, in the land of beer and lakes and pistol fire, on MLK's birthday, where there is no minorities and segregation's mandatory. But that's a whole nother story altogether, and no matter the weather or hardships that any place brings, I'll still laugh when people shiver and say it's freezing, or say, hey, no, wait, I already had 18 mixed drinks, but I guess it's a Midwest thing, and I'm a mess from a dirty city, and brought most of this filth I've gathered with me.
Welcome to episode 20 of Experience Andy Weins Live. This week, I listened. It's what I did. I put a survey out last week asking you, the audience, what do we need to cover next? And the first survey result I got was how to listen better. And just so happens, I wrote about it in my book. So we're going to be talking about what effective listening looks like today, coming up after the verse.
My work labors on as lovers sleep in each other's arms, remaining calm and collect. I begin my self-reflection process of redemption. Honestly, I don't know where this road leads, or if I'm even going. Could be rowing upstream, or worse, chasing my dreams to the peak, to finally be somebody doing something with what I have, rather than saying again and again that I can't and I won't anymore from this day forward. Cause Lord knows the past is set in stone, the present is yours to mold and to use for future uses. I know I'm a nuisance, I'm told, cause I'm neither young nor giant nor gnome. I don't sleep on these streets usually, though I've my own. I don't sit well with idle hands, though don't know what to do when I'm home all alone. I'm a menace thrown from society, and as it lies to me, I'll smile silently as others do as they please. I am watching and listening, and I'm grinning all the while, cause sometimes all you can really do is smile. So as the work labors on, I'll keep on singing my songs, and this day is never done. We just keep on spinning around that sun, and well, through all these miles and trials, all I've learned to do is smile. Is to smile.
Welcome to episode 20 of Experience Andy Weins Live. Today, we're going to be talking about listening. And even as I was listening to my brother's song there, the thinking song, that he sets up the end of the song with the line, watching and listening, grinning all the while. And so it's very appropriate today that we're going to take a little bit of time to listen. And first, what we want to kick off first, is a moment of gratitude. Gratitude is important, so we kick in the endorphins and share positive news. Everything I've ever read and learned talks about positivity. Master resiliency training, we talk about hunt the good stuff, 4 different methodologies to look for the good things in life. In EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, we start all of our meetings with a segue, share something good, positive, professionally and personally, to get ourselves in the right frame of mind. And even now in my relationship, where we have struggled in the past, focus on the negative, we are being very intentional about focusing on the positives every weekend when we get to spend time together. So I like to kick things off, being thoughtful of what am I grateful for today. And this week we're going to do a VIP dinner with some of our select clients at Camo Crew Junk Removal. And so I want to show gratitude to the clients that we've had. In the last 8 years, we've had over 6,000 clients that have used our services when we were our other brand and now as Camel Crew Junk Removal. And every one of those projects, from a single $99 project up into over six-figure projects we've done for major corporations, every one of those projects has allowed me to continue my dream and my journey in entrepreneurship, and also allows me to take time to invest into my next journey and the next path I'm on, which is sharing my ideals with the world. So I am thankful and I show gratitude to all those individuals and organizations that gave us a chance to serve them. And we coming up this next couple of weeks here, we'll hit 1,000 reviews in 4 years as Camel Crew. We're about 940 some right now. So we're very grateful for that. Second thing, my book, Words Fucking Matter. It's available. Kindle, soft cover, hardcover, an audiobook, all available. Someone actually emailed me recently, said they were listening to it, and I tripped up and I said a line twice. So now we cleaned that up. So that's when I know people are listening, which is a amazing segment, if I do say so myself, to get into what we're talking about today. Today, the entire segment is about listen. Often we're talked as leaders about how to effectively communicate, and it's all about how you put yourself out there. So what does it look like to be a good listener? And what are some listening things we can do? Because the whole goal here is that we have high quality conversation interactions where two people have shared common vision. So this can be found, this whole section we're going to talk about today can be found in chapter 5 of my book, High Quality Conversation. And so last week, one of the things we talked about, which is the first lesson we're going to go over here today, is understanding goals. Last week, we talked about the methodology that I use, which is consult, convince, convert. Often what ends up happening in conversations is that you're not sure what type of conversation you're having. And I liken this to with significant others or family members or even peers. When someone comes to you with a complaint or a concern or they're venting, one of the best things you can do and ask is, what is your goal with this conversation? Because sometimes they're not looking for a solution. They're looking to vent. And sometimes them say, oh, I'm just venting. Cool. Get it out of your system. Once you said it out loud, let's be done with that. Right? What can you do about it? Right? And we can start asking some good questions so that they get the time to emotionally decompress and level and get logical. Right? And we're having an emotionally charged conversation, and eventually we can get to a logical conversation. Some people will want to stay in that emotional conversation. And if you're not in the place where you can receive that emotional information, sometimes it's best to break contact. And other times when people want to vent and you're good with it, hey, let's have a little vent session together. And then we have to put a cap on it because we also have to get back to life. And we can't allow this to consume us. So the first step in all conversations is understanding goals. I learned this methodology of all places about 20 years ago in a Lutheran church. I went to my buddy the Holtz's wedding, and I was underage at the maybe I was 21. I think I was 21 because I was the one that had to buy the beer. I was 21. My buddy Eric was not 21 because I bought the beer. It was in his truck. We got pulled over later. All worked out. No big deal. Anyhow, we brought a keg to the wedding. That's what it was. It was BYOB wedding because we're 18, 19, 20. And so we brought a keg because we thought that was cool. And turns out we were like everyone's best friend. Anyways, going back to this wedding. So one thing that I learned about this wedding was the triangle effect. And I used it this weekend with conflict resolution with my girlfriend and her son. And the triangle is really simple. When you have two people in a marriage and they have challenges, there's conflict among them. It's very linear. And then you have this like kind of pong effect. You say something, it just goes back and forth. And like sometimes you're giving 80% and the other person's giving 20, and then they're giving 90, you're giving 10, right? It's this, right? And so it's very simple visualization. We're looking at conflict between two people. And what I learned in this wedding was that the whole methodology and theory was as both people grow closer to God, they'll naturally grow closer together. So I've always thought about conflict resolution is about let's get aligned, right? We can be both in our own individual fighting perspectives. We have our own perspectives on the world. And yet, when we align ourselves and share the same vision, this is the end state we want. Now we can walk and work closer to that end state. And as you work closer to that end state, you naturally get closer together because you get rid of the noise, the distractions, all this other BS. And on the other side, When you have a shared vision with somebody and you have a shared goal and you're on that righteous path to get to that shared goal, and the other person gets off track or gets distracted, it's very simple to say, okay, hold on. When we were in a logical place, we had the shared goal. And you can even do this in conversations. What is the shared desire? What is the ideal end state? What is the goal of this conversation? And that way we can get it back on track. So when you say something that ends up being uncomfortable, it's uncomfortable. And yet it keeps people on track because we agreed to have this goal in mind. Second thing, right? And this is one thing that this is very, very tactical, very simple, and yet people struggle with it. Asking good, open-ended questions. One of the things I've seen often with people is they ask questions and yet they're leading questions or they're embedded suggestions. And so I'm going to give you a couple examples from my book. Your open-ended question. How do you feel about moving? Very simple, open-ended. How do you feel? Leave it at that. You can explain your feelings. You don't have to justify them. Versus a leading question. Aren't you excited to move? It sounds very harmless, and yet aren't you excited to move is closed-ended. It's yes or no. It's very transactional. And if you're not excited, well, what are you? And now you're not even giving people the opportunity to say what are the other things they are. They could be nervous. They could be anxious. They could be worried. They could be tired because they've been packing all week, right? There's all these other feelings they can have. It's a very low-risk conversation. And yet let's think about it when you have an employee come up to you or your significant other. You say, are you mad? Versus, hey, how are you feeling? And then when they, okay, what has made you feel this way? You don't know. It could have been traffic. It could have been something your kid smarted off to you. It could have been something a customer said to you. And often people don't know why they're upset. And when you ask good open-ended questions, we can boil it down. Another methodology that I love to use in this same vein on the good open-ended questions, the why 5 times methodology. You ask the question why 5 times. And then on their 6th question is, and what can you do about it? Because often why people are upset here and why they're upset after you've asked them 5 times, you get so much more clarity. And it goes from I'm mad because this happened to me to the wounded inner child in me or whatever work, or you know what, it was all this group of people. No, actually, this person has habitually said things about me and they always bothered me, and I never call them out on their shit, right? And that's why the why methodology 5 times works. So good open-ended questions. Good open questions. How do you feel about that? Tell me more about your experience. Why did you decide to pursue this option? Or why? Nothing about these questions is overly complicated, overly cumbersome. These questions are simple. The less, I would argue, the less words you put into a question, the more open you're hearing all possible answers. It's when you give a lot of information, well, and how do you feel about this? And how do you feel about it? And when don't you feel this? And it's like, well, hold on. How about just ask what's going on? Why do you feel this way? What led to that feeling? All very good open-ended questions. And then when, not if, never if, when you ask good open-ended questions, the next lesson is very simple. Listen. Do not listen to respond. Do not listen for a trigger word. Listen. When you listen long enough, you'll start to hear trends. You'll start to hear people as they start to develop why they're upset or why they're happy. Listen to a kid. They'll tell you about the same puppy 37 times because they were so excited about this puppy. They'll tell you about everything about the puppy. And it's pretty obvious the puppy made the kid happy, right? And because we were listening for it, and you want to share in that joy and have them relive that moment. And it's important that we listen. And then as we're listening, ask more questions. Again, open-ended questions, some deep questions, right? Real world, very simple. EOS. One of the things we say, and it's a tell. It is, tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. When I'm struggling in conversation, sometimes I will just say, okay, tell me more about that. And then you're giving people permission to go a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. And as you get to the depth, we start to really identify the real challenge or opportunity. And again, it goes in both ways. When someone's really excited and happy, well, tell me more about that. Oh, my daughter at the end of last year, she was the artist of the week at her school. I said, tell me more about that. Well, Dad, everyone, like a lot of people are artists of the week. Well, tell me more. Well, actually, not that many because there's only 30 weeks of school and there's 400 kids. And yeah, it is pretty special. Tell me more. Well, I was really excited to paint this painting because I did it of this. Oh, tell me more. Well, I really like art class because of all these reasons. Okay. I've learned so much about my daughter because she won a contest. And to her, originally, it was, well, Dad, it's not that big of a deal. And the more she told, the more excited she got to share with me. And we made it a big deal. We made it a celebration because I asked her to tell me more. And I listened. That's it. Listen. Single word. Listen. This is one of the ones that people struggle with, and myself included. I find myself struggling with it this last weekend. It is have control. And as I even read my own book, I don't like the word have control, right? Or take control. It's more regulate your emotions in the real time. Recognize that you're going to be emotional when it comes to certain things and learn to regulate them. We had an experience this weekend where I learned about it was because of a hockey game, learned that a young woman was being singled out by a young male. They're all young, and that she got hurt twice by this same kid. And so as I'm listening to this story, I'm thinking about my daughter and I'm getting really worked up and thinking, what would I do if that was my daughter? And I got pissed. All right. And I could feel the hair on the back of my neck standing up. I could feel myself tensing up. I could feel myself clenching my fists because I was pissed for her and I was ready to take on all the wrongs in the world because of it. And eventually I did confront the father of this kid. And when I regulated in real time, I told myself the things I had to tell myself. So when I had the conversation, none of those emotions that I felt initially came through. I told myself to remember the goal of the end state. The goal of the end state here is that the kids have a productive and safe hockey game. The goal here is that young people turn into good humans someday. The goal is that we recognize that putting your hands on a woman is unacceptable. And because I focused on that goal and not what happened, I was able to regulate my emotions in real time. And I was pissed. I was ready to run through a wall and punch somebody in the face on the other side. And yet I was able to have a conversation between two adults because I chose to regulate in real time, because I chose to be self aware of what my preconceived notions are, the way I was raised by my grandmother and my mother, and the way that I was taught to treat women. And the fact that when I see injustices in the world, I want to right all the wrongs. And it's one of the reasons I joined the military. And it's one of the reasons why I put myself out there so much and so often is because I choose to be uncomfortable. I choose to be the beacon of light for those that are helpless and hopeless at times. And so because of that, I was emotional. I was charged. I was ready to fight anybody and everybody. And yet I chose to regulate in real time because I recognized in myself that showing up ready for a fight would lead to a fight, and showing up ready to have an understanding between the two adults would lead to an understanding between two adults. And it led to a very good conversation. Finally, we talked to two more. Next one, the old KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. I talked about with questions, open-ended questions. Keep them simple. Less is more. This is our opportunity to listen. And in order to listen, you have to do this magical thing I talk about every now and then called shut the fuck up. And the best thing you can do is to keep it simple. Understand, why are we talking? We talked about last week. Wait, WAIT. Why am I talking? If the goal is to listen and understand from others, you will be unable to do that when you are talking. Take the time to listen. Take the time to keep your questions short and sweet. Allow moments of quiet and stillness in the conversation. When you allow those moments, you're allowing those natural pauses. You're allowing people to breathe, rethink what they said, and then possibly re-engage down that same path. You're allowing this simple stillness. Keep it simple. When you start complicating conversations, you start complicating something's already complex emotions and feelings and activities and stimulations and activating events. It's all very complicated. You adding layers of complexity only make it that much more complicated. We were talking last night with my girlfriend's son, and he brought up a lot of things forward. There was this, and there was that, and the other thing. And we got to three actionable items. It's okay. These are three things we can agree that different parties have to take ownership of. And then we started reeling again. And I said, okay, hold on. We're done now. We have 3 great actionable items. Let's focus on that. Keep it simple. We're not going to solve all the world's problems today. We can solve a 1 week, a 7-day problem, a 14-day problem, and a 30-day problem. We had 3 different courses of action so that in a month from now, we can take on 3 new problems. Keep it simple. If you end up taking on 50 things and call 50 things a priority, when everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. Finally, know your audience. This is something I've struggled with. I am who I am. I like who I am. I'm going to show up who the fuck I am every day, all day. That's who I am. And yet there's an opportunity here for me and all of us to know our audience. The way I speak to my 9-year-old daughter is different than the way I speak to my military friends. It's different than the way I speak to my mother and my girlfriend and my coworkers and employees here at Camel Crew Junk Removal. Knowing your audience is key. And the challenge a lot of people have is they assume they know their audience. And your audience is not this homogeneous population. No, it is the person you're talking to in that moment. It might be someone you're extremely familiar with. I had a recent conversation with one of my best buddies. I called him 10:30 at night about a random thing I had asked him about, and he broke down crying and opening up to me. So I'm calling this guy thinking, oh, we're going to have this jovial conversation, bullshit. And it turns out to be a completely different conversation because in that moment, he wasn't the person I was anticipating. So I had to then adjust my cadence in conversation. And I asked, do you want to talk about it more right now? He said, no, right now I'm not in a good place. I'm in a good enough place where I'm good for the night. I'm not in a good place to talk about it now. Sounds good. I asked. So now knowing my audience, we re-engage when the time was right. So knowing your audience, you often people will say, well, I know this person. You don't know how they are today. You don't know how they're feeling. And my argument of why you don't know how they're feeling or what's going on with them is often they don't know. It's the best thing to know your audience is to go back to all the other lessons learned here earlier today. Keeping things simple, asking open-ended questions, understanding what their goals are, listening to what they have to say. When you do those things, you better understand and know your audience because we want to begin with the end state in mind. Who am I communicating with and how do I most effectively communicate with this person in this time and place and space in the world we find ourselves together today? And so for today, I thank you for joining me on another episode of Experience Andy Weins Live. And I will leave you with the 3 lessons that I so often regurgitate in my own head when I am stuck in a place or anticipate a mountain I must climb. And I give those words to you this day and always. Do the fucking thing. Tell the fucking world. Show the fuck up. And we'll see you next week.
Well, through all these miles and trials, all I've learned to do is smile. Is to smile.